Hi, I'm Brian Kramer, author of H2H Human to Human and host of Leadtail TV. Is it time for a radical redefinition of the role of CMO? My guest, Rhoan Morgan, CEO at DemandLab, certainly thinks so, and she makes her case throughout our conversation as well as in her book, Change Agents. In today's episode, we drill into what that new CMO skill set looks like. How in the weeds do marketing leaders need to get with their technology stack? How can they align with their sales partners in making revenue the team's North Star? And where does creativity and the human element fit in? Here's Rhoan. Rhoan, it is so wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us on Leadtail TV.
I'm really excited to be here, Brian, and can't wait to dig into this really interesting conversation.
I know.
Thank you.
So we're going to dive right in, and I'm going to start here with just a question actually about your book, about change agents.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about that book because you make a case in the book for a radical redefinition of the role of CMO.
The reality is that right now, today, CMOs are being held accountable for revenue impact. And a lot of that is because of the writing and the thought leadership that came out from attribution platforms, perhaps marketing automation. Because I think, when we started over 10 years ago, it was still just like, hey, how many leads are you getting in the door? And I'm getting this many. Oh, how many are you closing sales? It was still so utterly siloed that there wasn't a strong connection yet. That was, for us starting in 2009, but before that, when I was actually doing marketing for companies, the communication was still just really disconnected. So now, today, they're being held accountable for revenue impact, for not only influencing revenue, but also clearly generating revenue. So being the team that's bringing in the leads and making sure that those prospects that they're quality, like quantity is no longer interesting, quality. And so are you pulling in really engaged, really excited, really interested people that sales can talk to, so your conversion rates are really, really high compared to where they might have been from marketing to sales. But I think that the reason for that is that, we now have the capabilities. So technology also has advanced tremendously over the last 10 years. And now, marketing has always, I think, been highly connected to the audience, highly connected to, the voice of the customer, and caring deeply and owning that relationship in many, many different ways. So marketing, as you know, has so many different categories within which they're working, right? Customer marketing, loyalty, that sort of thing, demand gen, etc. So now they own all of that technology. Really, they're the biggest buyer of tech. It's been shown by most of the different analyst firms out there. They're the closest organization to the customer. They have all the technology that is customer facing. They are also the biggest consumers of data. And so with all of this, and then of course you have to layer on actual things like content that people care about. So you've got sort of this foundation of technology and data, process, and the connection with the customer. And then, I think this deep connection and care for the customer. There's not another organization in a company that I think is better equipped to take this on today.
It kind of makes me think, like, in the midst of all that, do you see where creativity exists in all of that? Are you seeing like where they're allowed to be creative anymore? It kind of like I mean, I hope it's there. I want it to be
Yeah,
there, because that's kind of
yeah.
where not only the fun of it, but also what separates a brand from another brand and speaks to the audience and creates you know what I mean? Like, what do you think about that?
So it's interesting that you asked that question, because it was probably 3-4 years ago when I came to the team and I said, everybody stop for a minute. We are implementing marketing automation. We're accelerating how people are using these systems and CRM and all the ancillary marketing and sales enablement and all of this stuff. And but why? So it's sort of like there were so many people that were buying it in this sort of idea of, if you build it, they will come. And just doing tech for tech's sake, in a way. And it got to me, I sort of had this existential crisis where I thought, this is not fun. And I think it's true in marketing teams as well, because there's a lot of pressure for this sort of traditional marketer to put on this sort of digital capabilities and this data analytics capability. And I happen to think that so we took a step back and we took a look at what is our purpose as a company. And our purpose is to absolutely make this technology, the data and everything, work for companies. But we decided we have to layer on that sort of the level of engagement, authenticity, humanness, as I'm sure you can, dig. And so the way that we look at it is, marketing requires talents of all sorts, and you can never lose that creativity. Machines will never create. Well, you have seen some poems coming out of machines that seem human, but I don't believe that the machine can replace the creativity that the humans can bring to that. And there's the creative in terms of artwork, what fonts to use. I was a graphic designer in my early 20s, so I really honor creativity. I love that. But also there's the creativity in just thinking about, well, how am I going to leverage the data and segment the data to create a personalized, engaging experience? I think that takes a lot of creativity as well. So there's that should never be lost. And it should be really, I think you need to lock arm in arm with those folks.
I also am curious about how much a CMO should be in the weeds.
We work with a lot of CMOs and their teams. So many levels of executive marketing leadership, and into the field marketers and how to support them best. But at the end of the day, I think a CMO needs to be deep enough. They need enough knowledge to know what is possible. They should not need to know how to execute in a system. So they need enough knowledge to know what's possible. I think also they need to be able to know how to hire the right people to make what's possible actually happen. And I'd say finally, and something that's really critical here, is knowing that your systems are set up to give you the right reports and insights that you can trust. We had a small story. We had a client, this was some years ago, and we came in to take a look at their instance, and we did an audit and we reviewed a lot of the reports, and it turned out that the reports were wrong. And these were the reports that were being delivered to the board, and the CMO had no idea. And I remember the team coming back to me and saying, Rhoan, what do we do? Should we tell them? Like, how are we supposed to deliver this news that these executive reports have been wrong for a year or however long it had been? It was a long time. And the answer was like, the answer that we received back from the client, because of course we did tell them, was, I didn't hear that, like, no, this can't be right. This can't happen. And there's, we felt deeply for that individual and for the team, because they just put all their trust into a system and then let it run. And so anyhow, so that's something that I think is just super critical. Knowing that you have the reports that you can really use, and obviously they have to be the right reports, but bringing true insights to you, knowing enough about the system so that you can hire the right people. That doesn't necessarily mean a certification always. Our hiring process is pretty arduous, but that's because, it should be as an agency. I mean, but how are you making sure that the people you're putting in place truly know their stuff? There should be some rigor around that, and just being sure that you know what is possible with these systems, and hire, and then you've got those people in there to just chug it away and make awesome stuff happen. To me, that's where the CMO, because you're right, they need to make sure that the brand is still protected, and that there's that it's a big job as a CMO to be orchestrating all of this, and the digital Martech side is just one side of that at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. It's so big, and yet it's so small compared to everything else, which is, it's kind of funny because you think about Scott Brinker's Martech stack that we've all seen, and it's like massive.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming, the amount of possibilities that we can all put in. And it's impossible to know. The real thing about them is you really don't understand them until you actually run real data through them and you see how they work. Where should someone with a traditional marketing background start?
Technology is constantly moving. I think the younger people are always going to be up on it. I'm not going to go to my VCR joke, actually. But what I think they can do is really look at where they're strong, and also be clear about their mandate. At the end of the day, there are how many now? 8,000 remember technologies on that Scott Brinker map. You definitely don't need all of those, and there's tons of redundancy. But so for me, it is understand your mandate. There's still traditional marketing that must be done even before you bring in technology, being clear about the market, being clear about the product, being clear about the audience. So there's quite a lot of work that without that, the technology isn't really going to serve you as well as it could. And it can serve you exceptionally well if you have these foundational pieces done. So for me, understand the mandate, understand where you're strong, and then find the people to fill the gaps, because nobody should be everything. And, bring in an amazing team. And, we talk about that a little bit in the book, Change Agents, which is how to build that team, beg, borrow, and steal. And some of our most successful clients have actually brought in people from IT to be a part of their marketing team, because perhaps, I'm thinking of one client who's been around for many, many decades. And so their marketing was much more traditional. And as they knew that things needed, and they're just like taking off because they've embraced the technical side. They're so much so that they're bringing people in from that organization to drive and to lead. So, it's be really clear on your mandate, understand, get all of those traditional things taken care of, and fill the gaps with great people.
So I'm curious about what are some specific examples where marketers need to get more familiar with and comfortable with data where they may not be right now.
Yeah. So data is really complex, and you're right. You can, it's coming from so many different channels, and it's moving, all of it. And there are also a lot of ways to structure data, right? So I would say just understanding how data can be structured and just getting some of that knowledge, unless you're going into that space professionally, then of course it's what you know. But what can they get more familiar with? Understanding the data structure, understanding data integration. So how do platforms get connected and data flow between platforms? I think this is one of the most important elements of, I don't know if I've talked about it yet, but at DemandLab, we have started talking about what we call marketing-led customer experience. And so for us, a marketing-led customer experience, it's bringing that traditional customer experience, which used to be very fragmented across many different organizations within a company, and really taking marketing to the next level of the customer champion, the journey creator, experience innovator. And how can you do all of this? Well, you must be able to integrate your systems across the organizations, from marketing and all of the ancillary things that marketing is doing, into sales, the CRM, and all of the sales enablement tools. So all of this data is getting fed, and then into onboarding, customer success, customer marketing, customer service. All of this information does need to flow. Maybe not 100% needs to flow across all, but you need some of that data to flow throughout everything. And so in order to be really successful as a sort of marketing-led customer experience executive, it's around integrations and it's understanding data structures.
It's so as you're looking at that, so leading the organization is one side of the challenge, but eventually we get down to having to lead teams through changing the way they've historically done things and are currently doing them. How have you approached this part of the process where everyone's nodding their heads until it's time for them to change?
So that's such an awesome question. And it is one of our absolute favorite challenges, because once you can get past this, like, the opportunities are endless. But, I think that it can be considered something that's a bit too daunting. And people say, it's too much. I don't even want to do that. Well, first of all, you don't have to change everything at once. And secondly, I think that, from a marketer's perspective, I like to go in and promise to change as little as possible, especially when we're talking to sales, because we're there to serve the sales organization. And by that, I don't mean, hey, I need a new sell sheet. Okay, we're going to make you one. No. We're there to make their lives easier, to provide them the insights, to provide them content and tools and, as much support as possible, but from a very collaborative perspective. And so, when everybody's nodding their heads and yes, we're into it, we're ready for this, where do they get hung up? I think something that could be, for me, the biggest challenge is just an alignment on perspective. Oftentimes their KPIs are not well aligned. And so you need to think about what are their ultimate goals and how can you perhaps shift and modify those goals so that they're heading in the same direction. And, how do you integrate things like the process and the data again? So I go back to integrations. Those are some of the biggest challenges. And I'll also say, we have the most successful clients that we've worked with have zero ego attached to anything.
And the last 12 months have been, well, insert your preferred adjective here.
Yeah.
We're all dealing with a lot of change and a lot of new challenges. And in all, we're dealing with a lot of different things. Some cases, learning to let go of things we're all holding dear. But putting that in a business context, is there a particular best practice or even just a common belief about marketing that you see holding teams, companies, people, marketers, CMOs, anyone back?
What I think now is really critical moving forward is kind of, let's see a shift in the mindset of the CEO and the CFO. And that is a much more strong embrace of the CMO. And this could be its own conversation. I think actually you and I could probably riff on this for a long time. But you know, we need to be really clear about what is it that the CMO and the entire marketing organization is bringing to the table. And now it's a lot of revenue. The mandate that CMOs have now is like, you must bring or contribute to 30, 50, 70% of our revenues. So sort of, I would say, shift the way that you're thinking about marketing in general. And if budgets are getting cut, you're making a huge mistake. So I think also last year budgets were cut. People had to manage, and that was, you had to kind of err on the side of caution. And the first thing that would go from a CFO perspective, we actually did a webinar about this, and a webinar on how to counter this, and what to do to avoid, to actually directly deal with these conversations and avoid too many cuts. So marketing cannot get cut, and it's actually been proven in previous downturns that the companies that double down on marketing are actually the ones that come out most successful and far ahead of even the people that sort of stabilized. So I would say that's one thing. Move forward, look ahead, and trust, absolutely trust your team.
So I want to end on a lighter note. I saw that you're currently living in the south of France. So now I'm having FOMO. And because it's supposed, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm
So
lucky.
how is
Feeling pretty
working
good.
abroad? How is working abroad, living abroad with your family and how's that changed the way that you work? How's it changed your perspective on marketing, if at all?
I wouldn't say it's changed my perspective on marketing. And that is, I guess, because I'm just really focused in terms of what I think marketing does and should be, and how it can be. And we were actually, our team was 100% remote, probably around end of 17 into 2018. And before that, we were at least half remote. And we probably spent a year prepping before moving here. So, because I wanted to make sure the team felt really well taken care of. So we talked about what would my calendar look like, all of these sorts of things. On a personal note, it's wonderful because I don't get a single phone call until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I've got a lot of time to focus in the morning because nobody's up before, well, nobody's typically working and making calls at 8 a.m. Eastern time or 5 a.m. Pacific. So that's my perspective on marketing. I think it's influenced more on my past, working internationally when I worked for 2 years in Cameroon, Africa, running marketing and sales. And I worked for a while at a theater company because I wanted to give back to the community, and they were a phenomenal theater company, and I did marketing for them for a while. I loved it. So that's sort of set for me what marketing is all about. Now, how it's sort of impacting us as a company is, well, for me, I'm like, what's the next opportunity out there? And so we've grown and have been hiring into an EU team. And we've actually already been serving time zones from, Pacific time zone into Asia, Singapore, and that sort of thing. So now we can just do it a little bit better since we have more people in the EU, in Europe. And I'd say that, the biggest focus is really around our culture, and really maintaining that, because, and this is something I know a lot of companies are going through, certainly last year, potentially into this year, all of a sudden you're remote, all of a sudden you're only seeing people on video. And how does that just change? You don't have those sort of coffee break moments anymore. And so you just have to really focus quite a bit more on communication, absolute transparency, sharing information, celebrating moments, and finding ways of still continuing to really grow that culture.
Beautiful. And all while getting to live in one of the most beautiful places on earth. So cool. So excited.
With the best wine, the best cheese, the best baguette. I mean, yeah.
I'm living through you right now. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on Leadtail TV and joining me and sharing of yourself over the last roughly the last hour, and so much richness and goodness, and we can't wait to catch up with you again and see the growth and the great stuff coming from you.
Sure. Well, this was wonderful. I appreciate the really thoughtful questions, and have enjoyed the conversation quite a lot. So thank you. Thanks for having me on.